What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. My name is AJ Malillo.
And I am Stephen Rombolo, even though you can't
And
see me.
yeah, I was going to say, even though we can't see Steve today, he is with us in voice and spirit. He's on the road right now, so that's why, unfortunately, there's no video for Steven today. But you know what? This is the type of thing that we do to give you a show. We do it from the road from our homes, rain or shine. If you notice, like I have a different background behind me almost every other episode because I'm in some other random room that I find myself in to be able to record the show. So this is
It's
what we
true.
do for the people, Stephen.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's what we do for the people. I think it's also just what two like young 20-year-old gentlemen who have a podcast would do. Like, we got our hands involved in so many other things that like you kind of almost have to expect that it's like a traveling show. You never know what you're gonna get, where you're gonna get it.
For sure. I would call us like a traveling circus, a two-man traveling circus.
Circus definitely, yeah. There's
Yeah.
there's a lot of clowning around that happens.
A lot of clowning around. Well, you know what? That's what you get when you got two handsome, funny, charismatic guys that like to hang out together. Just some clown around.
It's true.
But with that, Steve, how was your week so far? Where are you off to? Um, what's going on?
I Dude, honestly, this week has been pretty great. I'm like coming up on 2 weeks post show for the bodybuilding, so that's been a lot of fun. Kind of figuring my groove out back in the gym, training heavy. My body looks different every like 15 minutes, which is weird, and then probably fueling some added body dysmorphia. But you live and you learn. We push through those things. Um, Work's been great. Been spending a lot more time with the family now that I don't have to worry about eating and dieting and cardio and all the fun stuff that comes with the show. Got the chance to go down and see my sister, hang out with her dog Kelly, sweetheart that she is, and I'm coming to you all live right now, but pre-recorded when you're hearing this, from the Richmond, Virginia city limits, on my way to Myrtle Beach for the weekend to visit some friends and just kind of have a little relaxation before the holidays kick in and that whole beast of a season starts.
Sure, escaping the cold of the Northeast. I think it's like, I don't know, it feels like it's about 20 degrees right now. But luckily it's not Buffalo where they're supposed to get like 6 feet of snow. So,
Yeah. Well, and
but
and I'll be honest with you, it's a very ill-fated escape because it's currently 32 degrees here anyway. So if anything, I'm like a bad omen bringing the cold down south with me.
well, hopefully the further south you get, the better you are. It's only Richmond, Virginia. You got like what? A whole state and a half to go. So,
It's true. It's true. Try not to
hopefully
remind
that
me.
temperature will pick up. Hopefully that temperature will pick up. Um, but yeah, with that, look, let me just say a little bit about my week this week. If you can't tell, I'm exhausted. You could probably hear it all over my voice. It's been a tough one. Our big writing assignment is due at the end of this week for our legal writing class, so that's been taking up a lot of my time. Luckily today, Stephen, I put my my final words on the paper, so it's
Nice.
written. It just has to be edited, and then it'll be ready to go out. So I'm going to take tomorrow and I'm not even going to think about it. I'm not even going to look at it. I'm going to stay as far away from it as possible. And then Saturday, on a clear head and hopefully a nice fresh glass of mug of coffee, I will look it over and be able to edit it with a nice clear mind, fresh eyes after basically getting cross-eyed for the last week. And that's all I've been thinking about. And then finals kick in. Well, right after Thanksgiving, I get a little bit of break in Thanksgiving. I'll myself be down in North Carolina for Thanksgiving with mom and dad and my both grandmothers, both my mom's mom and my dad's mom. So that should be a good time.
Man, we're trading places.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For
I'll tell
sure.
you
But
what.
that's something else that we have to keep in mind. Next week is Thanksgiving. We do record the show on Thursdays. So we might be breaking on to a Wednesday recording, and I might be on the road, or even possibly a Friday recording. We'll have to plan that out.
Yeah, I got to jump back. There is no better feeling. And, this is a feeling I've been released from for a little over a year now, but we'll soon have to feel again. But you said it perfectly. Like you said, my final words are on the paper. And what a sigh of relief that feeling is. Like, I know our audience can certainly empathize with like just how phenomenal it feels to like put that last period, hit enter, and you just kind of like lift your hands off the keyboard and you have that moment where you're like, and you're there, you've decompressed, you've done it. And I think as your friend and you know co-host here, I want to just take the opportunity and say how proud of you I am, because you told me a little bit about this assignment, and we have a show to get into, but I don't want it to go unnoticed how hard the work that you are doing is, and how mentally draining it is. So to balance, like, hours at work, family life, this law school, all of that, a tremendous applause is very necessary for you at the moment as you're rounding this out.
Well, appreciate. We'll see how it all turns out at the end when the grades come in and all of that stuff. But it is hard work, and I'm proud of myself just for doing it at this point. I've never been the type of person that sort of loses sleep over the A or the B or whatever. But now more than ever, I'm almost like, hey, as long as I can make it through and I, put my best work forward, the grade is like the least of my concern at this point. I'm just trying to do the best work that I can put out there, and hopefully the grade follows, type of thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know as well as you know, and just a good message to spread is like, that's the reality of the situation. Do the work and the results will come.
Yep, for sure. For sure. Some aren't as just physically shown as what you did with the bodybuilding show. Some aren't as graded as like what I'm doing, where I'll actually get a physical, letter grade at the end of it. Um, but you put in the work on anything it is, whether it's just being a better person from that one day to the next, being a better you. Um, those results will start to show as long as you continue to put in that work and put in that time and effort. um, Whether it's physical or actually graded is sort of not that much of a concern as long
No.
as you can feel it and you know it.
And you know what? What an appropriate message for us to kind of kick off like Thanksgiving season with. Be thankful and grateful, for the work that you do for yourself. I think that's a great message. And I'm happy that we landed here.
Well, you know what? It's a good place to sort of hop off, get into politics. We could talk more about what we're thankful for and all of that stuff come next week for Thanksgiving. But let's hop off. Let's get onto the train of politics. What brings us all here today, anyway.
Chugga chugga chew chew.
A train that, you know what, you would hope after these midterms ended, you can hop off and not think about for a while. But man, the news cycle keeps on spinning.
It's relentless.
It truly is. So we had what some are calling, I'll say, and by some I mean one man in particular, the greatest speech in American history. Step aside Gettysburg Address, step aside JFK's inaugural address, step aside FDR announcing that we're going, into World War II. Um, Step aside Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, or, um, you know, I've what is it? I've seen the mountaintop.
Yeah,
Right. Step
that's my
aside.
favorite.
Yeah, it's been outdone by the new greatest speech in American history, called by some, which is Donald Trump's third campaign speech, in which he is announcing his campaign for the third time. That's now the greatest speech in American history. I'm sorry, he has declared it so.
It
So
does. It doesn't
we'll
have
break
the
that.
same ring as "I Have a Dream" or the Gettysburg Address. There's nothing regal about it.
Sure, it didn't start, 4 score and 7 years ago when our fathers uh, brought forth here on this continent a new nation. Doesn't have that. It doesn't have the you know. I had a dream that someday my children will be judged
Live in
not
a
by the
world where they are not judged by the color of
right.
their skin, but by the content of their character.
Sure, it might not have that ring, but you know what ring it does have? It does have the ring of the Donald, and you know, that in and of itself should give you all you need. But other than that, some big news that came out. Nancy Pelosi has officially said she will not be running for minority leader in the House of Representatives, as she was removed as Speaker of the House. Republicans get the slimmest of majorities in the House of Representatives, so that the midterms wasn't a complete debacle for them. And it appears at this point that the Speaker of the House will be Kevin McCarthy. The Senate Minority Leader will still be Mitch McConnell. And the Senate Majority Leader, I believe, still appears to be Chuck Schumer. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much where we are in the state of politics right now. The Senate is going to be under Democratic control. Georgia decides if it's a 50-50 split or a 51-49 split. But as we all know, since there is a Democrat in the White House, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is the tie-breaking vote, thus giving all of sort of the committee assignments and any close vote the Democratic edge. So that's all I got, Stephen. Let me know if I missed anything on my midterm recap.
No, I think you hit all the bases. I mean, we're gonna obviously hop into detail on all these things, but to me, the thing that I want to spend a little bit of time on is sort of painting the picture of what we think a divided government's going to look like in the Congress, because this could be the first time in a long time that we've had divided government. Where we have one party in power, in the executive branch, and then they only have one chamber of Congress. Because the past few elections, it's been a total flip flop where it's one party has power in the executive, the other party either has, relinquishes, or retains power in Congress. But it's divided government. This is, I think, going to present a new series of challenges, especially considering the unique climate that we're in post Trump.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see, obviously, it's already starting. You're going to see House investigations. I know that they just uh, released stuff that they're going to start targeting Hunter Biden for, his shady dealings. And I'm sure you're going to see investigations into Dr. Fauci and certain other major figures over the past few years, like we saw the January 6th committee going into President Trump and the people in his orbit. So that's pretty much, I think, going to be the big things you'll see out of the House. From a legislative perspective, I think that you would hope you will find some bipartisan issues that are going to make their way through and be able to be passed and presented and so on. But I'm sure it's going to be mostly obstruction and holding off what the Republicans perceive as the worst of the Democratic agenda. I think that you're also going to see a lot of questions into our just blank check spending in the conflict and war in Ukraine. And I think that that's going to be an interesting debate, especially now. I think you'll start to see some sort of moves. I know that some representatives, especially in border states, are trying to shore up bills for border protection. So we'll see how those pan out. Now that you're also seeing some firings when it comes to the national security and border patrol agencies up in the executive. So I think it's going to be interesting for sure. And we'll see how much of this is going to be playing sort of blocking politics. The Senate and the president are going to block things from the Republican-held House, or vice versa, where the Republican House is going to just try and block everything from the Democrats, and we get nothing done for the next 2 years. I'm sure we can all hope that there will be some sort of a compromise there, and the agenda will at least get some sort of legislation passed.
Oh, AJ. Oh, AJ. You and I have been doing this for how long, and you're out here talking about compromise?
Well, I mean, one can hope, right?
Yeah, how long are you going to hold on hope for, though?
I'm an eternal optimist, Stephen.
I think another important dynamic, and this is a take that I've heard a few times this past week, just from different sources, but worth noting and keeping an eye on, is as much obstructionism as there's going to be from both sides of the aisle. The one saving grace for Democrats moving forward is that because we're going to retain the Senate, we are basically still going to have you know unchecked ability to pass federal judges into positions, which is, albeit one of the very few successes of the Trump administration, but he passed a record number of federal judges into their seats and positions. And I know a lot of Democrats are really upset that things went the way that they did. Regarding Trump and his judgments and the judges that he put in those positions, which some people would argue set us up for the decision in Dobbs, which overturned Roe. So Democrats, even though, we overperformed in this midterm, couldn't keep both houses, we still kept, in my opinion, the most important house, the Senate, because we can still sort of push forward a judicial agenda, albeit I don't know if we're as organized and going to be as productive at affecting that change, but the potential exists.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's important to have the Senate exactly for, like you said, you can sort of push through those judges for the judicial um, powers and levies of powers, which has seemed to be a battleground of sorts for the last couple of decades. And I would just push back. It was one of the major successes of the Trump administration to put as many federal judges into seats as they did, including 3 Supreme Court justices. But one of multiple policy um, wins of a Trump administration. I think that in talking to a lot of people, what you find is a lot of people say, yeah, I really like what Donald Trump did policy wise, but it's just that dang personality that gets in the way, which is something that we can get into now because he is running again, Stephen. He is officially running again, and we have some parts of that speech that we can present to you guys. So, why do you say we start from probably, in my opinion, one of the best places to ever start, which would be the
The
beginning?
end.
Oh, well, close. Which this is right pretty much in the beginning of the remarks where he says he doesn't yet say that he's officially running here, but he strongly intimates it.
Citizens, America's comeback starts right now.
So he says America's comeback starts right now, and I find that phrase itself very interesting, Stephen. Sort of to break that down a little bit for the rest of this speech, what you hear from Donald Trump, this very, very long speech, might I add, that has no business being as long as it was, is as you start to see his campaign pitch. What is Trump's formula for 2024? Which is America's comeback, saying, look at all of the success that we had. Your life is worse now with the Biden administration, and we're going to bring it back to what it was under the Trump administration. So I think that's going to be his pitch. That's his best pitch. That's what his pitch should be if he's running again, or as he's running again. So that's pretty much how this thing starts off is, and then it goes into, and if you're interested, C-SPAN does a great job. It's just straight up the speech, and you got all of the highlights starred. So I would recommend checking out C-SPAN. But you go into this, and he talks about the border security and crime, the midterm results, Herschel Walker, blah blah blah, and eventually, finally, he gets to a point where he announces his candidacy for president.
There are a lot of bad things, like going to Idaho and saying, welcome to the state of Florida. I really love it. In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
So did you catch that, Steve?
I did.
Not only are we making America great again, we're making it glorious again as well. So he officially announces, and then he goes on to talk about issues on the border, issues in foreign policy, and again, let's take this from the campaign perspective, right? If Let me ask you, Stephen, if you are, which you wouldn't be, but let's just put you in the shoes. If you are Donald Trump's campaign manager, and you know your biggest rival at this point on the Republican side is a governor of the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis, what is your best push as saying this is what I can do and not what Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis doesn't have this on me. I was the president of the United States. So what type of policy do you think you should focus on your campaign?
I mean, my gut instinct is foreign policy.
That's right. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did. He spoke a lot about his, relationships with China, his relationship with Russia, and things that deal with domestic policy too, but border policy mostly, which also has strong foreign policy ties, right? So from that perspective, I think it was a smart speech. It was very long, and it was very low energy for a Donald Trump speech. Um, and those are some just kind of high level analysis that I got. Stephen, I don't know if you want to add sort of your take on the speech, but it was it was lackluster, man. I was expecting a lot more. I'll say that.
I mean, listen, I don't know what this guy does at Mar-a-Lago. I know, we got pictures and stuff of him when he's in his New York office with the drawers full of illegal amphetamines that he gets from the UK. So he might not have been hopped up, and that could be why this was such a low energy speech from the former president. But personally, I mean, from the clips that I've seen, because believe me, no amount of money can make me sit there and listen to that guy talk for that long. Straight honesty.
It was 64 minutes, man. His
Yeah.
his golden escalator speech when he first announced wasn't even that long.
Yeah, I would say that's probably about 64 minutes too many. I don't know, man. Listen, I can't act surprised. I can't act like we didn't see this coming. Obviously, we all knew this was, his game plan. This was in the cards for a very long time. I'm more so concerned, and I guess I'll use the term excited to see about how he's going to continue to posture himself as a better alternative for the Republican Party than Ron DeSantis, who, I mean, just to call a spade, Ron DeSantis for the Republicans was the all-star of the midterms. He flipped Florida. He has won by a tremendous margin. He's converted more Republicans in that state. Like he's far and away the success story of this. And unfortunately, the Republicans couldn't do anything to stop the guy who, lost the House and Senate in the midterms, lost a general election, and then was impeached twice. There's nothing they could do to stop that guy from jumping in the race. And it blows my mind that there are people, commentators, writers that I've come across this past week who, and albeit I understand the logic, but words carry weight, who say that because of the position that Donald Trump held and the position that he is currently in, whether we like it or not, he is the leader of the Republican Party. I think affording him that title this early on is a tremendous mistake, and a lot of Republicans are going to eat their words for that later on when this party is going to be in a complete disarray. I can almost guarantee you in the next 2 years, because you're dealing with two different ideologies here at the end of the day. And I don't know, man, you have a disappointing loss in the midterms, and you decide to come out with a 64-minute boring speech that people were trying to leave, where you just kind of say the same things you've been saying on your little weird press tour for the past 2 years. I don't know. It doesn't seem like he's really positioning himself or his party to be successful at all in the future.
Yeah, I mean, look, he is the leader of the Republican Party, right? And I think you see that in the fact that his primary endorsements hold a lot of weight, even if they don't hold the weight in the general election. They hold the weight in the primary election. But that being said, like, look, we're headed for a civil war in the Republican Party. I think everybody knows that. I mean, it's still early. You know, it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy that he jumped into this race 2 days after or not 2 days, 1 week after the 2022 midterms, when the 2024 election isn't for another 2 years. Like,
Yeah.
this is insanely early. People do not jump into races like that. So we have plenty of time before we see other people trickle in to the race. And obviously Ron DeSantis is the big name right now, but who knows what happens come the actual 2024 cycle, which really doesn't start until like summer 2023.
Yep.
So we'll see who jumps in, because I think honestly Ron DeSantis is probably the next to jump in, the next major candidate to jump in. And then you start to see more of the trickle of other people. You know, you'll see Ron DeSantis jumps in, maybe a Mike Pence jumps in, or a Tim Scott jumps in, stuff like that.
Can we get a Carly Fiorina again? She was a lot of fun during the debates.
As only if we could get a why am I blanking on her name? The Democrat from the Crystals Democrat from 2020 election.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. You're gonna kill me because I won't remember her name either. Man, yeah, do a quick Google. But this is a good opportunity. Go for it.
I want to say it's like Meredith or something. Marianne Williamson.
Yes, the author.
Yes, Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, we need some wackos.
Yeah, I mean, it's no fun without any.
No. I will say, I think now, as of when we're recording this, right? This is like 10 o'clock Thursday. What's today? The 17th.
Yep.
So we are 2 days away from our current president's birthday. Joe Biden is about to turn a whopping 80 years old on Saturday. And I think, and again, begrudgingly going to give Donald Trump and his team some credit here. What a great way to pressure, for one really old man to pressure another really old man, than by announcing candidacy and essentially that you're going to run against him a few days before he, continues his streak as being the oldest person in office. That means
Donald Trump's a spry 76.
Yeah, so spry. As we just talked about his lackluster speech. No, I think that there's a really viable strategy here, because all fingers after that announcement, which, like I said, we already knew was coming down the pipe, immediately turned to Joe Biden. And one thing I admire about Joe is when he's faced with these hard questions, as opposed to giving you a direct answer, he does like the very old school politician thing, which is like almost like Teflon Donish, where he just kind of is like, haha, no comment. Like a reporter asked him, and they were like, "Do you have any thoughts on Donald Trump running for office or whatever?" And he just goes, "Not really."
Yeah, well, I mean, Joe Biden has also already said that he's running in 2024 after the midterms. So,
well, allegedly, it's up in the air, because this week what we heard was he was going to take the time over the holidays to discuss it with his family.
Yeah. Sure. And that basically means as long as he's still breathing and they can push him on stage, he'll be up there.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting place, because now you sort of back the Democratic Party up into a corner where you're making people decide really early on where they're hedging their bets on both sides. Are there Republicans have to decide, are we rolling with Trump, or are we seeing who else pops in? Democrats have to answer this question of, what is Joe Biden going to say, and is he going to say something that we support or don't support? And on top of that, if it's not Joe Biden, who do we want? Because the great thing about the Republican Party right now is there is a clear alternative to Donald Trump. I don't believe that there is a clear alternative to Joe Biden, because Kamala Harris is not popular. People do not want her to run. And for the layman, the person who is not you or I, who can rattle off names that we think would be good candidates, the field on the left is wide open, which is just as scary as having a shoo-in.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats clearly have a very weak bench. Like, the bigger household names. You have the Pete Buttigieg's of the world, which isn't a strong candidate. You have Liz Warren, maybe, but she's not that strong of a candidate. We saw that in the last election cycle. Um, and that's really it. Uh, AOC, I don't think is strong enough, but she has some media pull, and she's good on camera, so we'll see. But I would say this: Trump is trying to clear the field, and he's just been trying to go after DeSantis this whole time. And then he made this interesting, weird attack on Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who like isn't even thought of as a presidential hopeful at this point. I'm not sure if you saw this, Steve, but he went out on Truth Social and he said, and this is a direct quote from what he posted. Young kin, two separate words, parentheses. Now that's an interesting take. Sounds Chinese, doesn't it? End parentheses. In Virginia, couldn't have won without me. I endorsed him, did a very big Trump rally for him telephonically, got MAGA to vote for him, or he couldn't have come close to winning. But he knows that and admits it. Besides, having a hard time with the Dems in Virginia, but he'll get it done. And Glenn Youngkin was asked about it, and he said, you all know me. I don't call people names. I really work hard to bring people together, and that's what we're working on. Glenn Youngkin is like, a middle of the road Republican, like old school, wear sweaters and tweed jackets type of Republican. And then Ron DeSantis was asked about the attacks that Trump levied on him, which he didn't mention once in the speech. I should add, the only person he attacked by name was President Biden and Nancy Pelosi. But when DeSantis was asked about it, he was like, guys, we just got through a midterm election here. Like, I'm here to govern. I'm going to keep doing that. That's why people voted for me, and sort of brushed it off, which is what you're seeing which I think is the only strategy you can do. It's not like you could start fighting right now. So it seems like the attacks aren't sticking. We'll see if he continues to try and levy them, and we'll see what happens. But it's going to certainly set up an interesting next, 23 months of election cycles.
Yeah, I'm a little stuck up on the racial Chinese insult that he threw at a...
Weird.
Yeah, that's... listen, we started off the last campaign full-blown racism against the Muslims. I guess we're having an onslaught with the Chinese this time on the Trump side. I don't really know what that's about.
Yeah,
again, not a great start out of the gates for Donald, but I won't act surprised.
I have no idea what he's going at. Like zero. At least when we're talking about when he started off the last campaign, right? Like you had this concept of, okay, he wants to close the borders because he wants to stop the drug cartels from going in, and he just said it very poorly. And he wants to pause immigration from certain Middle Eastern countries because he wants to be able to vet people before they enter the country. It's like, okay, fine, fair enough. And you just say that poorly, but I don't even know what he's trying to do here. Like, I can't even rationalize what this makes no sense.
Yeah, there's nothing redeeming about that.
But anyway, let's move on to our second story as we wrap up here briefly, and talk a little bit, which is a story that we covered earlier a couple months ago. The federal student loan forgiveness program has met its match in courts so far, and it's been stayed by the federal court, meaning blocked basically into taking effect. So for everybody that signed up, they're not going to get their money yet until this makes its way through the courts, and it's almost inevitably going to go to the Supreme Court. Right now, basically, there's a couple of different things. So the biggest challenge in this for the challengers of the court is to find plaintiffs in the case, so the people that are doing the suing, that have proper standing. So just trying to make this super high level, you need to have some sort of an injury in order to sue somebody or the government. So there has to be some sort of an effect on you if you're going to bring suit. Like, say Steven got into a fight with some random person, right? And he gets knocked out. I can't sue on Steven's behalf, right? Steven has to bring that lawsuit. He's the one that got injured. There was no injury on my behalf. And in the in the Constitution, there's no sort of general taxpayer injury suit, like, oh, well, they're taking my money and they're spending it here and I don't like that, so I can sue. You can't do that. So the biggest issue that is being found is who has standing to sue. So there's been a bunch of different, very, very bright lawyers trying to figure this out with a bunch of different things. And the two most successful cases so far, one is, I believe, in Missouri, and it's Mahola or Mahela. It's a Missouri, basically, company that buys up the debt, the federal debt from people, and then they pay them back, and this company pays money towards the state of Missouri, because that's where it's based, and makes some interest off of the debt. So they're one of the suits, and that suit's made its way to the Eighth Circuit, and basically in that suit they've said, this is an unconstitutional action by the Biden administration. They don't have the authority to do this. The other suit just got held up in the Northern District of Texas, and that's more from two individuals that are claiming to have been injured by this because they own debt that doesn't qualify in the right way. So they're basically saying, like, we're harmed by this as well. And the judge was kind of like, you know what, honestly, they probably don't have standing, but we're not even going to look at it because we're going to look at it from the merits of their argument, which is that this overreaches power. And one of them also argued that there was no, basically when an agency puts out a regulation, they're required by law to, before they put it into law, or before they put it into actual law and to practice, the public has a period where they can read it and make comments for change, and then the agency has to look at that, maybe make the changes that are suggested, and then put it out again. And this wasn't done. So their case is like, hey, you broke the law even in your process of putting this. Even if you did have the power, you didn't do your process correctly. And it gets really weedy and into the jargon of, like, whether or not they actually broke the procedure because of the act that they used said that they didn't have to follow the same procedure. But without getting too much into the weeds of the actual case, what matters to the people is that this is blocked right now. It's making its way through the court, through multiple different circuits, and eventually it'll make its way to the Supreme Court, where we will find out basically whether or not this is a legal action by the Biden administration. And on its face, it seems like they did sort of overextend the congressional authority that was given to the Department of Education and the Secretary of Education in putting this act forward. So if you want this federal loan forgiveness, what you should really be doing is calling your congressmen and your senators to try and get this passed, instead of hoping for the president to make some sort of decree by cell phone and pen, as Barack Obama would say, in getting this act done, because they simply don't have the authority as vested in them from Congress to do so, especially when you're talking about spending billions of dollars by the stroke of a pen, which is not how our government is supposed to work.
So hundreds of billions of dollars.
Right.
Because I think the estimated cost of this plan is $400 billion, which is just an absurd amount of money to even conceptualize, let alone put your name on a piece of paper that says, yeah, I'm okay with this. to your point, I mean, granted, I'm not in law school yet, but I do fancy a good jargon here and there. And I do find administrative law to be tremendously interesting, which is, what this case is going to boil down to is these admin law concepts of the delegation of powers of Congress to other branches. And, I'd love a long form episode where we could talk a little bit about the history of administrative law and really explain why this case, I think you and I agree on this one, is sort of dead on arrival once it makes it to the Supreme Court, because simply put, and this is like basic civics, right? Congress has the power of the purse, and you are dealing with $400 billion worth of government money, loans, outstanding debt. And Congress never properly authorized, like you said, the Department of Education, the Secretary of Education, or the President, Joe Biden, to rule or make any concrete rules on this. And I think that's the other important thing too, is when you're dealing with admin law in a situation like this, they're not laws. Laws are passed by Congress. Rules are passed by agencies and enforced by agencies. So they play by a completely different, this is going to be, again, redundant, but the rules play by a different set of rules than the laws do. And I would tend to agree with the judge who ruled on this case that based on the merits and procedure alone, it really is an overreach of federal power. Joe Biden did this via executive action, which we've seen every president basically use and abuse the executive action power to test the limits on what they can and can't get away with. And unfortunately, for President Biden, I've got this feeling in my gut, and I think you agree with me, and I think anybody who has the slimmest understanding of, like I said, administrative law and procedure also sees this as being properly ill-fated. So if he wants to make square on this campaign promise to cancel the student debt, he really needs to work with, what is now going to be a divided Congress. So this, to me, if I'm going to speak candidly and honestly, seems like Joe Biden should have had this figured out while he still had both houses of Congress, because that's the only way you're going to get a thing like this done. I have no expectation that Republicans will want anything to do with passing this bill in the House, and therefore, we're not really going to see a proper resolution to this. In all honesty, it seems like a midterm campaign trick that worked when it needed to work, how it needed to work, and he can use the courts as a scapegoat and blame them. And, maybe that's the plan all along, is put together something to get the hopes up, get votes out, have it get struck down by a conservative Supreme Court, and then, use that as a campaign pitch when he runs again in 2024. But, what do I know?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. I couldn't have said it better. And I'll also say, excuse me. I'll also say that one thing that I was actually in a talk today that talked all about this case in particular, and the Biden administration kept changing this law as more court cases came. So there were different court cases that sort of presented themselves with different people arguing standing, and then in order to sort of void that and fix it, they would put exceptions to the law that they would just add, or the rule that they would just add in at whim to sort of knock down these cases as they would pop up, which is insane, right? You can't just willy-nilly change the rules like that because, there was a challenge to it, so we're just going to change it. That's not how that works.
It definitely doesn't sound like a winning legal strategy, I'll tell you that much.
That's fair. But I want to wrap up because it is starting to run past our clock time. But I want to wrap up by saying this. I was speaking to one of my classmates, my colleagues, who actually brilliant man. He has a PhD in philosophy, and now he's going to law school. And we were talking about the separation of powers, and one of the questions that I asked the speaker that came to the campus today was, look, you are fighting this obviously in the courts, but how do we fight this in the court of public opinion when the person on the other side says, yeah, but here's a $20,000 check, right? How do you fight for proper procedure when the other side says, let me wipe off your student debt? And my classmate said something very insightful. He was quoting a I believe it was St. Thomas More and a play that he wrote, where basically there's the characters are arguing about this sort of thing, and the one character asks him, if you were chasing the devil in the forest, would you cut down all of the trees in order to catch the devil? And the other character said, of course I would. I'm trying to catch the devil. Like, I would do anything I could to catch the devil. And he said, okay, so you chop down all of the trees, and now the devil turns around and he puts his ire on you. Where are you going to hide? What are you going to use? And this is how you have to look at things like procedure and the rules and how regulations are supposed to be done, because someday somebody else is going to be sitting in the Oval Office. You know, Donald Trump might win again in 2024, and if you're on the other side of the aisle, think about all of the terrible things that he could do with the power of his pen if you let him do it. It can't just be, well, my guy's in power and I like what he's doing, so I don't care about the rules, because the rules are there to safeguard you when you're not in power, when you are the minority party. So that's what you have to think about here. You don't want Joe Biden to just do something because you like it. You want the proper powers and authorities to be separated into the proper branches of government, so that there can't be either judicial fiat or executive fiat or legislative fiat. That's the whole point of separation of powers. You don't want to cut down all of the trees so that the devil can turn on you.
I mean, that's about as poetic as it gets, isn't it?
Yeah, when he said that, I was like, that was brilliant. That's one of the best things I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I could not have said it any better. That's a rather poetic way to close things up on this chapter. And furthermore, as much as I couldn't say it better, I also want to add that I couldn't agree more. And this, to me, is the beauty of politics. There is a give and a take. It's always a give and a take. You have to weigh your sides and understand, you know, power is a hot commodity. It comes and it goes real quick. And it's great when you have it, and it sucks when you don't. So if we want to push this country in the right direction, which I think, you know, anybody with a sensible mind and heart for this country and everything we stand for does, we have to be more aware of that fact and, you know, not cut down all of our trees. Also, brilliant commentary on deforestation and just, you know, preserving our beautiful country.
Look, one of the greatest Republican presidents of all time, Teddy Roosevelt, big conservation guy. Myself, big conservation guy. If you follow me on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, you know I'm a big fan of being outside, getting that fresh air, enjoying nature. So I'm with you. Keep the trees, man. Trees are great.
Metaphorical and physical.
That's right. All right. So with that, this has been another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. I'm AJ Malillo.
I am Stephen Rombolo.
And we hope to see you next week. Have a good week, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving also.